Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jerzen. I'm a second year medical student. In this video, I want to talk about a habit that I've been trying to improve myself for the past year, and that is reading. We all know that reading is good for us, but we always tend to see it as work than rather a task or a hobby that we do to improve ourselves. It's always seen as this thing that is tedious and cumbersome. All of us just find it so much more easier to take our phones and just scroll through Twitter or Instagram. I mean, at least that's what I think. But I realized last year when I started to develop myself personally that reading opens up a lot of opportunities for you. Looking back on it now and reflecting, I realized that there were some certain obstacles in my way that I faced when I wanted to start reading. And with my 1 year of experience, I can clearly say what those obstacles were and how I personally dealt with them, and I thought I would share it with all of you. The first obstacle was that I did not like to read what mainstream media asked me to read. So I would be following all these inspirational YouTubers and people on Twitter, and they would say, read X book to improve your life. Or they would say they read this certain book or these 3 books that changed their life completely, and you might think to yourself, oh, I need to read those books to start reading, and those are the books that I need to be reading. But more often than not, I would take my iPad, because I read on my iPad using Apple Books. I would go to the store and I would realize after reading the description that that book is just not for me. I would not enjoy reading it. So essentially, quoting James Clear from his book Atomic Habits, you need to take a habit and you need to make it easy for yourself to get into. And I would say for reading, making it easy is just by reading what you want to read. The book you read doesn't even have to be a non-fiction book. It can be a fiction book. My first books were Harry Potter because I really enjoyed the movies, and I remember reading them as a kid, but I never really understood them. And I feel like reading should be more of a hobby. You should not think of it as work. If you want to incorporate it into your daily or weekly routine, and if you want to start reading more, you need to start treating reading as a hobby so you can do more of it. The second obstacle I faced was this mindset that every time you read a book, you have to finish that book before you get on to the next one. I find it really bizarre that I actually thought that, because right now I'm currently reading about 3 to 4 books at the same time. Provided that they're all non-fiction books, I really don't think that you need to finish reading one certain book, especially if you don't enjoy reading that book. The second I stopped doing this, my rate of reading just skyrocketed because I could read more at the same time, and I would not be spending more time on a book that I really don't find enjoyable. And I personally feel like it's a graph, so if there's a book that you're reading that you don't particularly enjoy, the more you read it, the slower you're going to be reading it, or you're just going to be reading it just for the sake of reading or just for the sake of finishing it. And I feel like that's just a huge waste of time. You can spend your time in so many other better ways. Like I said before, reading should be a hobby. It should not necessarily feel like work at any point of time. So you should do as many things as you can to make reading more enjoyable, so you read for the fun of it and not just because someone asked you to read. The third obstacle, I say it in air quotes because it's more of a mindset change than an obstacle, is that you don't necessarily have to read books. Majority of my reading comes from articles or newsletters that I've signed up to. I think this is an awesome idea, and if you're only taking away one thing from this video, let this be that one thing. I mean, at least personally, a lot of my reading comes from articles and newsletters. Books make up maybe 20% of my entire reading plethora. What I feel like is that books usually have 1 or 2 main points that they want to make, and that's maybe 20% of the book, and the rest of the book, the 80%, is probably just examples exemplifying that one point. I also think that reading articles is actually a really good way to get into the habit of reading. You might only take 2 to 10 minutes to read one article compared to a book which might take you anywhere from a week to maybe months depending on how fast you read. But one problem I faced with that was that I would come across an article on Twitter or maybe from a newsletter that I'm subscribed to, and I don't necessarily feel like reading that article at that point. That's where read later apps come in. Some examples off the top of my head are Instapaper and Pocket. I personally use Instapaper because that was the one I found first before I found Pocket. How these apps work is basically they're an entire archive of things that you want to read later. So if you're on your phone and if you're scrolling through Twitter and you find an article that you want to read later, you can just click on the little share icon and send to Instapaper, and it'll automatically populate in the Instapaper app or Pocket or whatever you decide to use. Then later, between my studying or whatever, if I have some time and I really want to read something, I always know that there is something to read in the Instapaper app. Instapaper also works with newsletters. So for example, if you get one of my newsletters, which is sent out every Monday morning, you can sign up in the description below. You can send it to a certain email address, which will then populate that newsletter issue in the Instapaper app. So it doesn't necessarily live in your inbox where you will probably never read it and you'll just archive it or delete it. It just makes everything easier. So that's it for the 3 obstacles that I personally faced when I started getting into the habit of reading. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like and subscribe for a video like this every single week. See you in the next one, guys. Goodbye.